It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on the Pathfinder role-playing game system. We were talking about game mastering a little bit and rewarding your characters at different times for different types of things. Let's talk about experience and treasure and then move on from there. Experience. Now your characters will, through battle, through overcoming challenges, for defeating monsters, through completing adventures, gain experience points, or XP. When they gain a certain amount of experience, they will level up. This is going to show the progression of their character as they get stronger throughout their adventures. Of course, you want to sort of make sure when you're awarding their experience that you can either do it during a session or you could do it after a session. After session would be recommended more because that would be an easier way to keep track of it. Of course, the same can be said for leveling up. You always want people to level up in between sessions, or right after you've finished up. They can, of course, go off and do that on their own, but they want to make sure that's in between your sessions and they're leveling up, not in the middle of it. That's another reason maybe to award all the experience when you get to the end of the session. So you're going to have to keep track of a lot of information. You're going to have to know what like CRs and how much experience they're worth, have that chart at hand, and you have to keep note of any CR of anything they overcome, any monster, any challenge. You sort of keep listing of it, that at the end of the session then you will add that together and figure it out. Now you can do it two different ways. You can award it. You can either add all those numbers together, that you get all the experience you have, then divide it by however many players you have and give it evenly. Or there's an individual experience chart in the book where you can look at when you're looking at the basic CRs and how much experience that CR is worth. It will tell you how much an individual for a certain size party will get for that CR, and you can then use that also and just add those numbers together, the individual experience numbers. The choice is yours how you want to do it. Now you are also going to want to maybe give XP awards for accomplishing some kind of great task or maybe completing some kind of mission or some kind of adventure. Traditionally, you want this twice the average party levels, the CR equal to the average party level would be. So if their average party level is like 4, you look at twice what a CR4 would get, and that's how much experience you're going to give them as a reward for this. Now, granted, you can give them more if it's appropriate to what's going on. Like if they've overcome some kind of massive test or they've completed some kind of epic adventure that it might seem more appropriate to give experience, then you will. You're going to use this to balance out some of the fights that maybe you're not giving experience just all 4 fights. And usually you're going to do something like this if you want to give them a bonus and make sure that they're at the level that you think is appropriate but you want them to be. Now let's talk about awarding treasure, because awarding treasure comes in both forms of giving monetary things and giving magical items that your characters are going to use. Now, when you award treasure, you're going to look at a couple of different things. You're going to first look at how much treasure a character of their level should have. There's a chart in the book that tells you at certain levels of actually how much gold pieces worth of value they should have in both treasure and magic items combined. You're going to use that to kind of give an idea of when you should be giving out awards. There's also a chart that tells you how much treasure per CR of an encounter they should get in something. Like if I'm fighting a CR4 thing, how much treasure it's going to be getting. This also then divides it up into the normal sort of battles that you're going to have, or low fantasy or high fantasy. You're going to assume if there's less magic items, you're going to go for the low fantasy money because they're not going to need as much. On the other hand, if you want them to have more, the high fantasy. You're also going to use this in sort of connecting with perhaps when you have quicker or lower amounts of experience gained. You also would probably want to go onto the low side if they're having a lot of low encounter sort of based XP, because they're going to be gaining levels a lot slower. On the other hand, if you're having them a fast track, you're going to want to look on higher again. So there is times and places to adjust how much treasure they're going to be getting in these encounters. When you're talking about creating a character at higher levels, because it might occur just at the start of the game, or if someone dies and they're being replaced, you're going to want to split up how much their money is getting. Because the fact is, when they're getting equipment, they're going to have to spend it on a certain percentage of things. The general rule is 25% on weapons, 25% on armor, 25% on other magic items, 15% on magic items that are consumable, like potions, scrolls, and wands, and 10% on things like general equipment, masterwork tools, just coins they might have. And that's generally how they're going to split it. Now, other classes might have different formats for this because of their nature. A wizard's not going to spend as much on the armor or weapons. The same thing could be for a monk, which might not spend as much on armor at all, or anything. So you're going to sort of adjust these, but these are a general principle. You're not going to want anybody to have a magic item that costs more than half of the total amount of gold they should have. So if I should have like enough treasure equal 10,000, I should have not one magic item that's more than half of that, more than 5,000 worth of cost. I shouldn't. I should not. It should be below there, if anything. It could be close. It's getting a little ridiculous then that I'm spending that much on one item, but it theoretically cannot be more than half. Now, you can adjust some of these numbers just based upon the average of the fantasy you're in, too. You would consider, like, the amount of treasure someone should have at total of each level, half that for a low fantasy game, because they're not going to have much, double that if it's going to be a high fantasy game. Again, that's kind of, you're judging how much, and the same works for this works for the certain level of fantasy about how much magic you're having. There are some other factors, too. An NPC is generally going to have about 3 times the amount an average creature of the same CR is going to have because it's got all the normal equipment a person would have. If you're using NPCs, you might want to balance it out with creatures that would have little to no treasure. Some kind of vermin probably won't have a lot of treasure. An ooze probably won't have a lot of treasure, if anything. These kind of creatures, just you won't find a lot of treasure if you find anything. And using them, you can balance out the fact that you have NPCs which might provide higher treasures. Now, a treasure hoard is something your characters might encounter in order to represent a large portion of treasure they might get for accomplishing some kind of task. If you defeat some kind of dragon, if you explore a dungeon, things like that you would get at the end of it. And this should have as much personality as like your NPCs or other creatures that would be important in your world, because it's a reflection of the kind of world you're in. It's going to consist of a number of things, and dividing those things up, it depends on the kind of personality. You're going to have a general amount that treasure hoard is going to be, and you're going to break it down. Coins are pretty much going to be your glue, your filler. It's going to have a section of coins no matter what. It's traditionally going to be silver or gold, but you could have platinum or copper if you think it's appropriate to your treasure hoard. After that, you're going to, of course, have some gems. The gems, there's an entire chart of different types of gems at different values. It says the value and what types of gems it may be. You could give a lot of different types of gems, a variety of different prices, just to, again, give more essence and personality to your group. You're going to want to add things like masterwork tools, objects of jewelry, objects of art, things that of that nature you're going to throw a bunch of into that give extra value. Something that might be like, oh, I picked this up, it's got full value of what it is. It's like, I got a jeweled comb, I've got a golden portrait frame, things like that would add into the overall price of the hoard without detracting from it. And sort of the last thing you're going to throw in is, of course, the magic items, which you're going to kind of go by the average power level of the magic item, minor, medium, or major, and you're going to have an average value that's going to fill up a section of it, and then you're just going to roll and see. So really, you're only filling in the average of whatever that level of magic item is, and then you're just determining randomly what it is later on. So that means it could be more or less than that. But that's what you're using to fill in the blanks now, because we're really just building the basic idea of this treasure hoard. So I have like 3 minor. I don't know if those 3 minors are going to add up to the price I added into here, generally speaking, but they're going to represent that amount. That's when I'm building it. Now let's move on from talking about these awards, and let's talk about what you have to do to begin setting up for your game, because this very important part of everything is the setup. It's what you're going to do to begin the game. The preparation is the most important job as a GM you will have. Most important of all. This is preparing by either reading the adventure or making up the adventure and getting all the information together if you have that. This is preparing any handouts or any kind of props that you're going to have for the game. This is making sure that everyone's going to be there, or what you have for, like, you have a location and everything you need set up for it. It's preparing everything. And you're going to, like, get all this stuff together ahead of time because it's going to be necessary to building up your game. You're going to contact your players and you see if you have enough players. You're going to have to find out who's going to be showing up for the session. If they're not going to show up, then you have to find that out. Will you have enough players to play? What's going to be happening to their characters when they're not going to be there? You're also going to ask questions of any players that are going to be there. Information about it. Like if they have anything they want to do in between sessions. If they have anything related to any kind of their backstory or any kind of side quests they have. Or if any of what their motivations are during the course of the gameplay, you want to talk about it them. You might have small side sessions with a couple of the characters to resolve certain issues, especially if it's kind of traveling in between adventures to figure out what's going on individually with their character and develop it more. These are fine things to do that you're going to want to do in preparation for that game day. Then you're going to want to secure a location, of course, whether you are the host or not. It's very important. Then you have to look at how long your session is going to be. So I've figured out where I'm at now. I've got that secured. I've got everybody going there. If it's going to be extra long sessions, then you might need some kind of refreshments. You might need a lunch or a dinner. Then you should think about that ahead of time, what it's going to be, and kind of get a certain point in time during the session that you're going to have it. It's sort of like, I went around 6 o'clock. Like, if we're going from like 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night, around 6 o'clock, we're going to get kind of dinner. Granted, we're not going to stop right away if we're in the middle of a combat or some kind of encounter, but as close to 6 o'clock as we can, we're going to stop, get our dinner together. Now, I could have already sort of arranged that ahead of time. It could be like we're ordering something out. It could be that you assign certain people to pick up certain things to bring in, sort of not just pass the buck, but give people assignments in order to bring that. And that's something you want to make sure people just don't get snacks and sodas, because you want to make sure people are eating at least a little bit healthy for here. It's not an excuse to eat terribly, just role-playing. It's not really a great excuse to do that. You can, but it's just not a great one. Even if you're not the host, you want to make sure these things are taken care of. That, if you're going extra long and you're using someone else's house that you're being guests for, that everybody's still accommodated for, that you're not pushing everything on the person who's you're using the house of. You're not making them treat everybody else like guests. You're helping them out and putting that effort forward. So that's it for today. I talked about awarding experience and awarding treasure, and I talked about prepping for your games, getting ready for them, and being prepared for the session and everything you have to do for that. The most important things you have to do as a GM. In the next one, I'm going to talk about games and campaigns, and give over that basic information about what you're doing when you're running the game, and what you're going to do maybe when you're done a campaign. So if you have questions, comments, anything you say, anything you think left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support for the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. If you want to see some extra support, check out my Patreon, link to the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.